Hello, my name is Takayla James, and today I'm going to be talking about my senior project. So, have you ever wondered as an adult why you choose the people you choose, or why you communicate a certain way? Or have you even wondered why you are the way you are in your relationship as far as behavior and patterns? Well, that brings me into my topic. For my topic, I decided to do a podcast on interpersonal relationships, from caregivers to romantic relationships in the future. So, why did I choose this topic? I chose this topic because I always found more of an interest in interpersonal relationships in my senior and junior classes. That's something that just always caught my interest, and also for educational reasons. I would learn something in class one day, and it would be an overview of a theory or a study, and I will go more in depth once I got home because I was really interested in interpersonal and how the brain works and how these theories say that things happen in certain type of ways. So that is why I chose this topic. And once I got into the topic, it was the same thing, educating myself and seeing how these things that I researched affected me, like personally. So I'm going to go over my literature review. Then I'm going to get into my method section. Then I'm going to go over the results. Then I'm going to go over my discussion. And then I'll end with the conclusion. So for my literature review, I found a lot of great studies. Starting off, I found older studies because there is a lot of research from like the 70s to the 90s that say a lot about attachment style with caregivers. So one of the ones that I found from 1987 by Hazer and Schaefer pretty much proposed that your attachment style is the same from when you are a child to when you are an adult. The only difference really being that children can't accept romantic love and adults can. So an adult can feel romantic love as to where a child can experience it or understand what romantic love is. So that is one of the things he said. And he also says that our attachment style is also reflected on our model of self. And they pretty much extended Bowley's 1969 study, which was the first study that said that attachment style has something to do with caregivers. And they went on and they extended this study. So this study pretty much talked about how the attachment style is very similar from when you are a child to when you are an adult. Another study I went over that I found very important was that healthy relationships actually matter when it comes to physical health. So a quote by Fisher in 2021: social support is a very important part of being a human, and therefore when social relationships break down or are damaged, it can have a big impact on our mental and physical well-being. Going on with this academic journal, it also talked about how being in a long-term committed relationship has been linked to lower cortisol levels, and as a stress hormone that your body naturally produces. And it also suggested that people in long-term relationships are 3 times more likely to heal from an injury 3 months after the injury than people who are single. So it's pretty much saying that if you have that long-term relationship, you're more likely to physically be doing better, and that humans are meant to have these social connections, these social interactions, whether it's in the form of friendships or romantic relationships. It is healthy for us. It also found that being able to maintain interpersonal interpersonal relationships has positive effects on your health. And that is a study by Bryant and Conger in 2002. And that kind of brings us into our next point. Being able to maintain these long-term relationships, having a positive effect on your relationship. Well, on the flip side of that, we have anxious and avoidant attachment styles, and not being able, having these certain type of styles and not being able to maintain relationships can be bad for your health. These negative attachment styles were further researched in 2007 by Schaefer, and it highlighted that adults in satisfying and stable relationships were likely in secure attachment styles. They likely had secure attachment styles, seeing that the ones with anxious and avoidant attachment styles were more likely to have negative interpersonal relationships throughout their lifespan. If not changed, this can lead to distress, anxiety, and breakups in their relationship. And then a study that I found that talked about the positive effects of having a parent with positive attachment styles like secure was done in 2002 by Rector and other authors. So this basically studied 193 young adults, and it talked about how they monitored some parents with the warm and nurturing type of styles while raising these kids, and then they looked at the kids when they got older to the age of dating, and they noticed that the ones who had the nurturing parents became nurturing to their partners in the future. And then the last study I went over, I wanted to be able to find a study that showed that attachment style is not one stuck thing, and that if somebody is struggling with their attachment style or with their relationship with their caregiver when they were younger, that there is ways to grow. So a study that I found done in 2019 by Farley and Roseman talked about how attachment style can just be one puzzle piece of many influences on a young child's brain, especially at the adolescent years where your brain is more flexible and willing to take on new experiences. Also, when you are an adolescent going into adulthood, there is a change in socialization and selection process, indicating that individuals may be more open to change to these influences of differences in socialization and selection processes. So during your formative years, there is a chance that that is something that could have shaped your attachment style also, and it's not just dependent on your caregiver. And then something else that can have an effect on attachment style is environment. A study done in 2009 by Gorell basically talked about how your location can play a part in why your attachment style is the way it is, saying that you could be in a neighborhood that is low income, that has to do with your demographic, and you are more likely in that neighborhood to deal with some type of violence. Violence relates to trauma, and trauma relates to how you build your attachment style. Now I want to get into my method section. So the podcast took place July 31st, 2024, and it was on YSU campus. My participant was Michael Kane, and Michael Kane is my 3 to 4 year on and off again boyfriend. And it was important for me to get him on this podcast because I wanted to help our interpersonal relationship, and I felt like educating him on this podcast will help us in the future because we will both be able to understand we're showing signs of our caregivers. Is this something that we need to change or fix? And then also us being able to understand attachment styles that we have, whether they're healthy or not. We can identify them now. So in my method section, I went over my literature review. I asked him questions about his family, his attachment style. I asked him, just to keep him engaged, was this something he's able to believe as far as this study or that study. Now let's go into my results. So incorporating the podcast into the discussion, I feel like added a very personal feel to it. Through the podcast, I not only explored how caregivers relationships influence adult relationships, but also I put it in real world conversation with Michael. I was able to add a certain realness to it, and at the end of the podcast, we genuinely just start talking based off of our personal experiences with each other in our relationship. So I feel like the podcast went very good. I feel like I was able to use all of my information, and it wasn't overwhelming to him. It was to a point where he was able to understand. So now I'm going to get into my discussion. My exploration and my findings largely aligned with the research that was already in the field for attachment style, the significance of early caregivers in relationships and the development of attachment style from that. Additionally, I recognize the flexibility of attachment style, particularly during childhood and adolescence, and the potential for change of these influences. So, in conclusion, if you have never thought about your attachment style as far as your caregiver and your future relationships, it's definitely something to think about. That is what we went over. We explored interpersonal relationships, and we went over the literature review, all of the things that I was able to find that did build the connection between caregivers and childhood caregivers and romantic relationships. And then we also went over the method section, how I did the podcast, the results that I got from the podcast, the discussion, and then we're at the conclusion. Okay, so I would like everybody to think about their attachment style and how possibly changing it or reflecting on how their caregiver treated them as a child or cared for them as a child led to behaviors in their romantic relationship.